When a battered woman kisses a mafia kingpin to escape her abuser, she doesn't know she's just claimed protection from the most dangerous man in Chicago, or that he'll make her his in every way that matters. If you want to see how a single desperate act can rewrite two broken lives, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The crystal ballroom at the Palmer House glittered like something out of a fever dream, chandeliers dripping light across marble floors, women in gowns that cost more than Elena's rent, men in tuxedos discussing things that would never touch the evening news. Elena Voss stood near the bar, champagne flute trembling in her hand, trying to remember how to breathe like a normal person. She shouldn't have come. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, back when she'd still believed she could handle being in the same room as Derek. Back when she'd convinced herself that enough time had passed, that he'd moved on, that she was stronger now. All lies she'd told herself while staring at her bathroom mirror, covering bruises with concealer that never quite did the job. "You look beautiful tonight." The voice came from behind her left shoulder, and Elena didn't need to turn around to know who it was. She'd spent 2 years learning to recognize that particular tone, the one that sounded like affection but felt like ownership. "Derek." She kept her eyes forward, watching the crowd. "I didn't know you'd be here, didn't you?" He moved closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same one he'd worn the night he'd shoved her into a wall hard enough to crack the drywall. "I'm on the guest list. One of the top donors, actually." Of course he was. Derek Hale had money, charm, and a family name that opened doors across Chicago. What he didn't have was the ability to hear the word no without his hands turning into fists. "That's great," Elena said, her voice flat. "I'm sure they appreciate your generosity." "We should talk." His hand landed on her elbow, fingers pressing into the exact spot where a bruise was still yellowing beneath her dress sleeve. Not an accident, it never was. "Catch up. It's been what, 3 months?" 4. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "And we don't have anything to talk about." "I disagree." The charm in his voice was curdling now, showing the rot underneath. "You left without having a real conversation. That's not fair to either of us." Elena's pulse hammered in her throat. Around them, the gala continued, laughter, clinking glasses, a string quartet playing something classical and forgettable. No one was paying attention to them. No one ever did. That was the thing about men like Derek. They knew exactly how to hurt you in plain sight. "Let go of me." "Or what?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You'll make a scene? That doesn't seem like you, Elena. You've always been so good at keeping quiet." The words hit like a slap, mostly because they were true. She had been quiet. For 2 years, she'd absorbed his anger, his cruelty, his need to control everything she did. She'd made herself smaller and smaller, hoping that if she just disappeared enough, he'd lose interest. But men like Derek didn't lose interest. They just got angrier. Elena's gaze swept across the ballroom, desperate, looking for anyone who might help. Most of the guests were clustered in groups, deep in conversation. The bartender was mixing drinks, oblivious. Security guards stood by the exits, but they wouldn't intervene unless things got violent, and Derek was too smart to cross that line in public. Then she saw him. He stood near the far wall, half in shadow, a man who looked like he'd wandered in from a different century, maybe a more dangerous one. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her car. But it wasn't the suit that made people give him space. It was something else. Something in the way he held himself, like he owned not just the room, but everyone in it. His hair was dark with silver threading through it, swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes that tracked the crowd with the kind of focus that made Elena think of predators. He wasn't socializing. He was watching, calculating. And right now, those eyes had landed on her. Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. She knew who he was. Everyone in Chicago knew who Victor DeLuca was, even if they pretended not to. Especially in rooms like this where his money was welcomed but his methods were politely ignored. He was a monster, that's what people whispered. A killer. A man who ran half the city's underworld with brutal efficiency. He was also her only chance. "Elena," Derek's voice sharpened. "Are you listening to me?" She wasn't. She was moving, pulling free from his grip with a sharp twist that made him curse under his breath. Her heels clicked against the marble as she crossed the ballroom, champagne flute still in hand, heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack through her chest. This was insane. This was the stupidest thing she'd ever done, and she'd done some spectacularly stupid things in her 24 years, but she was so tired of being afraid. Victor DeLuca watched her approach with the stillness of a man who didn't startle easily. His expression didn't change. No curiosity, no interest, just that steady, predatory focus that made her skin prickle. Elena stopped in front of him, close enough to smell expensive whiskey and something darker. Gunpowder, maybe. Or just danger. "I need your help," she said quietly. One dark eyebrow lifted. "Do you?" It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, rough around the edges, with an accent that suggested he'd grown up somewhere far from Chicago's North Side. "My ex is here." Elena glanced over her shoulder. Derek was watching them now, his face twisted with confusion and something uglier. "He won't leave me alone. I need him to think I'm with someone else, someone he won't mess with." Victor's gaze flicked past her, landing on Derek for exactly 2 seconds. When his attention returned to Elena, there was something new in his expression, not sympathy, something colder. "And you think that's me?" "I know it's you." Her hands were shaking again. She set the champagne flute on a nearby table before she dropped it. "Everyone's afraid of you. I need him to be afraid." "Smart girl." Victor's mouth curved slightly, not quite a smile. "What makes you think I'll help you?" "I don't know." Desperation was making her reckless. "Maybe you won't. But I'm out of options, and he's coming over here, so if you're going to say no, say it now." She could see Derek moving through the crowd, closing the distance with purposeful strides. His face was tight, anger barely contained beneath that practiced smile. Victor looked at her for a long moment, those dark eyes cataloging everything, the tremor in her hands, the fear she couldn't quite hide, probably the bruises under her dress that she thought she'd hidden well enough. "What's your name?" "Elena." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Elena Voss." "Elena." He said it slowly, like he was tasting the syllables. Then he stepped closer, one hand settling on her waist with a possessiveness that made her breath catch. "Then you should probably kiss me now." She didn't think. Thinking would have stopped her, and she was so far past the point of good decisions that all she could do was act. Elena rose onto her toes, hands finding the lapels of his suit, and pressed her mouth to his. The ballroom seemed to tilt. Victor's lips were warm, firm, and for a split second he went completely still, surprised, maybe, that she'd actually done it. Then his hand tightened on her waist, his other hand coming up to cradle the back of her head, and he kissed her back with a deliberateness that stole every thought from her mind. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't sweet. It was acclaiming, pure and simple, the kind of kiss that announced ownership to everyone watching. And everyone was watching. Elena felt the shift in the room, conversations dying, heads turning, the collective intake of breath that came from 500 people realizing that something significant had just happened. When Victor finally pulled back, his thumb brushed along her jaw, a gesture that looked tender but felt like a brand. "Well," he murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "That's one way to do it." Elena's face burned. She couldn't look at the crowd, couldn't look at Derek. All she could do was stare up at Victor DeLuca and wonder what the hell she'd just done. "Victor!" Derek's voice cut through the moment, sharp and furious. "What the fuck is this?" Victor didn't hurry. He turned slowly, keeping Elena tucked against his side like she belonged there, and regarded Derek with the kind of mild interest someone might give to a mildly annoying insect. "Hail!" His tone was flat. "I didn't realize you knew Elena." "She's my girlfriend." Derek bit out the words, his hands clenched into fists. "So get your fucking hands off her." "Ex-girlfriend," Elena said, finding her voice. It came out stronger than she expected. "We broke up 4 months ago." "That's not how I remember it." "I don't care how you remember it." The fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest, but Victor's presence beside her felt like a wall between her and Derek's anger. "It's over. It's been over." Derek's face went red. "You can't just—" "She can." Victor's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Derek stop mid-sentence. "And she did. Now I suggest you go find someone else to bother, because this conversation is finished." This is bullshit. Derek took a step forward, then seemed to realize what he was doing. Victor hadn't moved, but the air around him had changed, gone colder, more dangerous. You can't just swoop in and I can do whatever I want. Victor's smile was thin and absolutely devoid of warmth. You, on the other hand, need to leave. Now, before I decide that you're a problem that needs solving. The threat hung in the air, unsubtle and unmistakable. Around them, the crowd had created a careful distance, a circle of empty space that no one wanted to cross. Derek looked between them, jaw working, and Elena could see the moment he made the calculation, could see him weighing his pride against the very real possibility that Victor DeLuca would make him disappear. "This isn't over," Derek said finally, directing the words at Elena. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was staying with you as long as I did." Her voice didn't shake. That felt like a victory. "Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't come near me. We're done." For a second, she thought Derek might lunge at her anyway, pride overriding survival instinct. But Victor shifted slightly, a tiny movement that somehow made him seem twice as large, and Derek's nerve broke. He turned and walked away, shoulders tight with barely contained rage. Elena watched him go, hardly believing it had worked. 4 months of blocked numbers, ignored texts, changed locks, and all it took was one kiss to make him back down. "Breathe," Victor said quietly. She realized she'd been holding her breath and let it out in a shaky exhale. The ballroom was starting to come back to life around them, conversations resuming in hushed tones, but the stares remained. Everyone was still watching. "Thank you," Elena managed. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have dragged me into your drama?" Victor's hand was still on her waist, warm and solid. "No, you shouldn't have, but you did, and now we have a problem." Her stomach dropped. "What problem?" "I just claimed you in front of half of Chicago's elite." He glanced around the room, his expression unreadable. "That means something in my world. It means you're under my protection, whether you meant it that way or not." "I didn't—" Elena stopped, unsure what she was trying to say. "I just needed him to back off." And he did. Victor looked down at her, those dark eyes impossible to read. "But your ex is the kind of man who doesn't handle rejection well. You embarrassed him tonight, made him look weak. He's going to retaliate." "He's not—" She wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat because Derek absolutely would retaliate. She knew that. She'd seen it before in smaller ways. Destroyed artwork, slashed tires, a broken window that he swore he had nothing to do with. "He will," Victor said, reading her expression accurately. "And when he does, he'll find out that you're mine now, which means he'll be coming after me too." "I'm not yours." The protest was automatic. "Aren't you?" He tilted his head slightly. "You kissed me, Elena, in front of everyone. You made this real, whether you intended to or not. I can handle Derek." "No." Victor's voice went hard. "You can't. If you could, you wouldn't have those bruises under your dress, and you wouldn't be shaking right now." Elena flinched. She'd thought she'd hidden them well enough. "Come with me," Victor said. It wasn't a request. "Where?" "Somewhere we can talk without an audience." He released her waist but caught her hand instead, his grip firm and warm. "Unless you'd rather stay here and explain to everyone what just happened." Elena looked around the ballroom. People were still staring, whispering behind their hands. She caught sight of Derek near the exit, talking to someone on his phone, his expression murderous. "No," she said quietly. "I don't want to stay." "Then let's go." Victor led her through the crowd, and people parted for them like water around a stone. No one spoke to them. No one tried to stop them. They just watched, silent and judging, as Elena followed a mob boss out of the ballroom. The night air hit her face like a slap when they stepped outside. Victor's car was already waiting, a black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who didn't react at all when his boss appeared with a strange woman in tow. "Get in," Victor said. Elena hesitated on the sidewalk, reality crashing back in. "I don't even know you." "You knew enough to kiss me." He opened the car door, waiting. "You wanted protection, Elena. I'm offering it. But if you get in this car, you need to understand what that means." "What does it mean?" "It means you're mine until I say otherwise." His expression was unreadable in the streetlight. "It means I decide when you're safe and where you go and who you talk to. It means you trust me to keep you alive because your ex won't stop, and I'm the only thing standing between you and whatever he's planning. That sounds like a prison. Maybe. Victor's mouth curved slightly. But it's a prison where you won't get hurt. Can you say the same about your apartment? Your job? Anywhere Derek knows to find you? Elena's throat tightened. She thought about her studio apartment with its flimsy locks. Her office at the design firm where Derek used to bring her lunch, back when things were good. All the places she existed, exposed and vulnerable. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. No, Victor agreed. You asked for help. This is what it looks like. She looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see past the reputation and the danger to the man underneath. His expression gave away nothing, but there was something in his eyes. Not kindness, exactly, but not cruelty either. If I say no, then I walk away, and you deal with Derek on your own. He said it matter-of-factly, but we both know how that ends. Elena closed her eyes, thinking about the last time Derek had cornered her, the bruises that had taken weeks to fade, the fear that still woke her up at 3 a.m, heart racing, checking the locks on her door. Okay, she said, opening her eyes. Okay. She got in the car. Victor slid in beside her and the driver pulled away from the curb without being told. They drove in silence through downtown Chicago, streetlights streaking past the windows, and Elena tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The penthouse was in one of those buildings that didn't advertise, the kind where security knew your face before you reached the elevator. Victor's apartment took up the entire top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture that looked uncomfortable and probably cost a fortune, art on the walls that Elena recognized from her design courses. Make yourself comfortable, Victor said, shrugging off his suit jacket. Beneath it, he wore a shoulder holster with a gun tucked against his ribs. Elena stared at the weapon, her mouth dry. Does that scare you? Victor asked, following her gaze. Should it? Probably. He poured himself a drink from the bar, whiskey, neat, and didn't offer her one. But I've never shot someone who didn't try to shoot me first, so as long as you're not planning to kill me, we should be fine. I'm not planning to kill anyone. Good. That would complicate things. He took a drink, watching her over the rim of the glass. Tell me about Derek. Elena's hands twisted together. What do you want to know? How long were you together? 2 years. And the bruises? She looked away. That's none of your business. It is now. Victor set his glass down with a soft click. You made it my business when you kissed me. So tell me, how long has he been hitting you? The question was blunt, devoid of sympathy, and somehow that made it easier to answer. 6 months, Elena said quietly. Maybe longer. It started small, a shove here, a grab there. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that he was just stressed. Then it got worse. Why didn't you leave? I tried. Her voice cracked slightly. 3 times. The last time, he found me at my friend's apartment and dragged me back. Said if I ever tried to leave again, he'd make sure I regretted it. But you left anyway. 4 months ago, I moved, changed my number, told my boss not to give out any information about me. I thought I'd been careful enough. She laughed bitterly. Obviously not, since he showed up tonight. Victor was quiet for a moment, studying her with that unreadable expression. Then he said, You'll stay here. What? Until I figure out what Derek's planning, you'll stay here. He said it like it was already decided. You'll have your own room, your own space. I'll have someone get your things from your apartment tomorrow. I can't just move in with you. You can, and you will. Victor's tone left no room for argument. Derek knows where you live, Elena. He probably knows where you work, where you get coffee, what route you take home. Staying there is suicide. And staying here is what? Safer? Yes. No hesitation. Derek won't touch you here. No one will. Elena wanted to argue, but exhaustion was setting in, dragging at her bones. The adrenaline from the gala was wearing off, leaving her hollowed out and shaking. Why are you doing this? She asked. You don't even know me. Victor picked up his drink again, considering the question. Let's just say I have a low tolerance for men who hurt women. Derek crossed a line, and now he's my problem. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting tonight. He moved toward the hallway, gesturing for her to follow. Come on, I'll show you where you'll sleep. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment, with a king-size bed and an ensuite bathroom that looked like something from a hotel magazine. Victor pointed out where everything was: towels, toiletries, a robe hanging on the back of the door. If you need anything, my room is at the end of the hall. He paused in the doorway. Lock this if it makes you feel safer, but you don't need to. No one's getting past my security. Victor. Elena stopped him before he could leave. Thank you for tonight, for this. I know I don't deserve— Don't. His voice cut through her words. Don't thank me yet. You might not want to when you see what happens next. He left before she could ask what he meant. Elena locked the door anyway, then sank down onto the bed, her dress rustling around her. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, 12 missed calls from Derek, and a string of texts that made her stomach turn. You made a huge mistake tonight. He can't protect you forever. We're not done. We'll never be done. She blocked his number again, knowing it wouldn't stop him, and set the phone face down on the nightstand. Through the window, Chicago glittered like broken glass, beautiful and sharp. Elena stared out at the city and wondered what the hell she'd traded one prison for. But at least this one had locks that worked, and a man with a gun who'd promised to keep her safe, even if she wasn't entirely sure she believed him. She fell asleep still wearing her dress, the bruises on her arms aching dully, dreaming of ballrooms and kisses, and the look in Victor's eyes when he'd said she was his. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what that meant. Tonight, for the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe. Elena woke to sunlight slicing through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. For a confused moment, she thought she was back in Derek's apartment, that the past 4 months had been a dream, and she'd wake to find him standing over the bed with that look on his face, the one that meant she'd done something wrong without realizing it. Then she remembered. The gala. The kiss. Victor DeLuca's penthouse. She sat up slowly, her dress wrinkled and twisted around her legs, mascara probably smeared down her face. Her phone showed 8:30 in the morning and another dozen blocked calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Derek, trying different phones. The thought made her stomach clench. Someone knocked on the door, 2 sharp raps. Yeah? Elena's voice came out rough. Breakfast is ready. Not Victor. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Mr. DeLuca says you should eat before the movers arrive. Movers? Right. Because apparently she lived here now. Elena found the bathroom and did what she could with her appearance, washing her face and finger-combing her hair into something less chaotic. The dress would have to stay. She didn't have anything else. When she finally emerged, she followed the smell of coffee toward what turned out to be a kitchen that could have been in a magazine spread. Victor sat at the island, reading something on a tablet, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked alert and focused, like he'd been awake for hours. A woman in her 50s stood by the stove, gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, transferring eggs and bacon onto plates. Good morning, Victor said, not looking up from his tablet. Coffee's fresh. Maria makes it strong, so pace yourself if you're not used to it. Morning. Elena slid onto one of the stools, accepting the plate Maria set in front of her. Thank you. Maria nodded but didn't speak, moving efficiently around the kitchen before disappearing into another part of the penthouse. She doesn't talk much, Victor said, finally setting the tablet aside. But she's been with me for 15 years, and she's more trustworthy than most people I know. If you need anything during the day, ask her. Elena picked up a fork, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. She'd barely eaten at the gala, too nervous about running into Derek. During the day, what happens at night? At night, I'm here. Victor's gaze moved to her face, assessing. You look like you didn't sleep well. I slept fine, considering I'm in a stranger's house. Not a stranger anymore. A faint smile touched his mouth. We kissed, remember? That makes us at least acquainted. Heat crept up Elena's neck. In the bright morning light, last night felt even more surreal. About that, don't apologize. Victor poured himself more coffee, black, no sugar. You did what you needed to do. I respect that. Even though it dragged you into my mess? I've been in worse messes. He said it casually, like getting involved with an abuse victim and her unstable ex was just another Tuesday. Besides, Derek Hale needed to learn some boundaries. Consider it a public service. Elena ate a few bites of eggs, trying to reconcile the man sitting across from her with the reputation that preceded him. Victor DeLuca. People said he'd killed his first man at 19, that he ran protection rackets, gambling operations, and a dozen other illegal enterprises, that crossing him was a death sentence, but right now, he just looked like a man having breakfast. "You're staring," Victor observed. "Sorry, I'm just trying to figure you out. Good luck with that." He stood, carrying his plate to the sink. "The movers will be at your apartment in an hour. I'm sending 2 of my men with them to make sure nothing goes wrong. Make a list of what you want brought here. Everything else gets put in storage." "I can't afford storage." "I didn't ask you to pay for it." Victor rinsed his plate with the efficiency of someone who didn't like leaving messes. "Consider it part of the protection package." "There's a package now?" "There's always been a package. You just didn't know the terms." He dried his hands on a towel, then leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Here's how this works. You stay here, under my protection, until Derek is no longer a threat. That could be a week, could be a month. During that time, you don't go anywhere without security. You don't contact Derek, you don't respond to his messages, and you sure as hell don't try to handle him yourself. Clear?" Elena set down her fork. "And what do you get out of this?" "What do you mean? Nobody does something for nothing, especially not someone like you." She met his gaze steadily, refusing to look away. "So what's the price? What do you want from me?" Victor regarded her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Not anger, exactly. More like recognition. "You're not as naive as I thought," he said finally. "I spent 2 years with Derek. That beat the naivety out of me pretty fast." "Fair enough." Victor moved closer, stopping on the other side of the island. "You want to know what I want? I want Derek to know that you're off limits. I want him to understand that touching you means going through me, and that's a fight he'll lose. As for you, I want you to stay alive and unharmed. That's it. That's it. That's it." His voice was steady, no trace of deception. "I'm not Derek, Elena. I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not going to demand something you're not willing to give. You're under my protection because I choose to protect you, not because I expect payment." She wanted to believe him, but trust was a muscle she'd forgotten how to use. "Okay," she said quietly, "then I'll make that list." Victor pulled out his phone, typing something. "I'm texting you the number for Marco, one of my men. He'll coordinate with the movers. Anything you're worried about, tell him." Elena's phone buzzed with the incoming message, a Chicago number she didn't recognize, and a brief text. "This is Marco. Ready when you are." "I should probably change first," Elena said, gesturing to her rumpled dress. "Unless you want your guys to think you held me hostage all night. They'd think worse things than that." Victor's mouth curved slightly. "Maria left some clothes in your room. Should be close to your size. Wear whatever fits." He left the kitchen before she could respond, disappearing down the hallway toward what she assumed was his office. Elena sat alone with her coffee and half-eaten breakfast, trying to process the fact that she'd woken up in a mob boss's penthouse and was now coordinating a move with his hired muscle. The clothes Maria had left were nicer than anything in Elena's closet. Dark jeans that fit perfectly, a soft gray sweater, even underwear still in the package. Elena tried not to think too hard about how Victor had known her size. She braided her hair to keep it out of her face, found her phone, and started making a list. Marco turned out to be a man in his 30s with a shaved head and the build of someone who spent serious time in the gym. He showed up at the penthouse with another man, older, quieter, with scars on his knuckles, and listened while Elena explained what needed to be packed. "Your ex," Marco said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "He know where you live?" "Yeah." "He gonna show up?" Elena hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe." Marco exchanged a look with his companion. "Then we'll be ready. Don't worry, we've done this before." That should have been reassuring. Instead, it just reminded Elena of how many other women had probably needed Victor's protection over the years. How many other desperate people had kissed him at galas, hoping for salvation. The move took 3 hours. Elena stayed at the penthouse, pacing the living room while Maria cleaned around her with quiet efficiency. Victor was locked in his office on a series of phone calls that involved a lot of terse Italian and occasional bursts of anger. Elena tried not to listen, but the walls weren't that thick. When Marco finally called to say everything was packed and loaded, Elena felt a mix of relief and grief. That apartment had been her first place after leaving Derek, her first taste of freedom, however incomplete. Now she was leaving it behind for another kind of cage, even if this one had better locks. "Boss wants to see you," Maria said, appearing in the doorway. In his office. Elena followed her down the hall to a room she hadn't seen yet. Victor's office was all dark wood and leather, with a desk that looked antique and windows overlooking the city. He was pouring whiskey into 2 glasses when she entered, despite it being barely past noon. "Drink?" he offered. "It's early." "Humor me." He held out one of the glasses. "Your ex showed up at your apartment." Elena's hand shook as she took the whiskey. "What?" "Marco said he was waiting in the parking lot when they arrived, started making demands, threatened to call the cops for trespassing. Marco convinced him that was a bad idea." Victor's expression was neutral, but something dangerous lurked behind his eyes. "Derek's not going to let this go quietly." "I could have told you that." "You did tell me that." Victor took a drink, watching her over the rim of the glass. "Now I'm telling you that we need to be smarter about this. Derek's already trying to figure out where you are. It's only a matter of time before he traces you here." "Then what do we do?" "We send a message." Victor set his glass down with a decisive click. "Tomorrow night, there's a meeting. Business associates, some city officials. Derek will be there. His father does work with some of my contacts. I want you to come with me." Elena stared at him. "You want me to walk into a room full of people who were at the gala? After what happened?" "Exactly. I want everyone to see that you're with me, not hiding, not running, standing right beside me like you belong there." His gaze held hers. "It's the fastest way to make Derek understand that this is real and that he needs to back off. Or it'll make him angrier." "Probably." Victor didn't sugarcoat it. "But anger without an outlet is just noise. Let him be angry. As long as he knows the cost of acting on it, he'll think twice." Elena took a long drink of whiskey, feeling it burn down her throat. "And if he doesn't think twice?" "Then I'll handle it." The way Victor said it left no room for doubt about what handle it meant. "I don't want you to kill him." The words came out more forcefully than Elena intended. "Whatever else Derek is, I don't want his death on my conscience." Victor studied her for a moment, something almost like respect flickering across his face. "Then I won't kill him. But I will make sure he understands that you're protected. That's not negotiable." "Okay." Elena finished the whiskey, the warmth spreading through her chest. "Okay, I'll go to your meeting, but I need something to wear that's not a cocktail dress." "Already handled. Maria's got a stylist coming this afternoon." At her look, Victor shrugged. "I told you, I've done this before. Protected random women who kiss you at parties. Protected people who need it." His voice softened slightly. "You're not the first person Derek's hurt, Elena. You're just the first one who had the guts to do something about it in public." The words settled over her, heavy with implications she didn't want to examine. How many others had there been? How many had suffered in silence while Derek smiled his charming smile and donated to charity? "I should go unpack," Elena said, setting down her empty glass. "Elena." Victor stopped her before she reached the door. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing last night. Walking up to me, making that choice. It took courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." The afternoon blurred into a parade of people Elena didn't know. The stylist arrived with racks of clothes, most of which cost more than Elena's monthly rent. Maria brought lunch. Marco stopped by to confirm that all her belongings were secure. Through it all, Victor remained in his office, conducting business in 3 languages, his voice carrying down the hall in tones that ranged from cordial to ice cold. Elena tried on dresses she'd never wear anywhere else, settled on a deep blue sheath that the stylist insisted was perfect, and wondered how her life had become this surreal in less than 24 hours. That evening, Victor knocked on her door around 7. "Dinner," he said when she answered. "Unless you want to eat alone in your room like a prisoner." "I'm not a prisoner." "Then prove it. Come eat with me." They ate at the dining table, pasta that Maria had made from scratch, salad with some kind of vinaigrette that tasted expensive, wine that Victor poured without asking if she wanted any. The conversation was stilted at first, both of them dancing around the elephant in the room. "Tell me about your work," Victor said finally. You're a graphic designer.
Am. I don't know anymore. Elena pushed pasta around her plate. I do freelance mostly. Logo design, branding, some web work. Nothing glamorous. You enjoy it? I used to, before Derek started critiquing everything I did, telling me my work was juvenile, that I was wasting my time. She took a drink of wine. He had opinions about everything. What I wore, who I talked to, what I ate. By the end, I felt like I needed permission to breathe.
Victor's expression darkened slightly. Men like that need control because they're weak. They can't handle a woman who has her own thoughts, her own power. So they try to take it away. Is that why you're helping me? Because you hate men like Derek? Partly. Victor refilled her wine glass. Partly because I know what it's like to feel trapped. My father ran his organization the same way Derek ran your relationship. Everything had to be his way. Everyone had to follow his rules. I spent 20 years under his thumb before I finally broke free. How did you do it? I waited until he died, then I took over. Victor's smile was grim. Not the most noble approach, but effective. Elena looked at him across the table. This man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, who people crossed the street to avoid, who just admitted to waiting for his father's death like a prison sentence ending. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? Someone scarier. Someone who'd make demands and rules and lock me in my room. She hesitated. Someone like Derek, just with more guns,
I have plenty of guns. Victor's tone was dry. But I don't need them to keep you here. You'll stay because you want to, because it's safer than the alternative. The moment that changes, you can leave. I won't stop you. Even though I kissed you in front of everyone, even though I made it look like we're together, especially because of that. He leaned back in his chair, regarding her steadily. You used me, Elena. That takes guts. I respect people who use the tools available to them, even when those tools are dangerous. They finished dinner in more comfortable silence, and when Maria came to clear the plates, Victor suggested they watch something. Elena followed him to a living room she hadn't explored yet, with a massive TV and furniture that actually looked comfortable. Victor scrolled through options, settled on some action movie that Elena had never heard of, and they sat on opposite ends of the couch like strangers sharing a waiting room. Halfway through the movie, Elena's phone buzzed. Another unknown number, another text from Derek finding new ways to contact her. You think he'll protect you forever? I know where you are. It's only a matter of time. You're mine, Elena. You'll always be mine. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. Victor noticed immediately. What is it? She held out the phone, unable to speak. Victor read the messages, his expression going cold and hard. Block that number, he said quietly, and give me your phone. What are you going to do? Making sure he can't keep contacting you. Victor took the phone when she handed it over, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. I'm changing your number. You'll have a new one by morning. Only give it to people you absolutely trust. That's like 3 people. Then those 3 people get it. Everyone else can wait. He set her phone aside and looked at her, really looked at her, seeing through the brave face she was trying to maintain. You're scared. It wasn't a question. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Come here, Victor said. She didn't move. Why? Because you're shaking and you look like you're about to fall apart, and I'm trying to tell you that you don't have to do this alone. His voice was rough but gentle. Come here, Elena. She moved across the couch, closing the distance between them. Victor put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side, and Elena let herself lean into him. He was warm and solid, and for the first time since leaving Derek, she felt like someone was actually holding her together instead of tearing her apart. He can't get to you here, Victor murmured. I meant what I said. You're under my protection. That means something. Why? Elena's voice cracked. Why do you care? You don't even know me. Victor was quiet for a moment, his hand moving absently along her arm. My mother was like you, he said finally. Trapped with a violent man, too scared to leave. She died when I was 12. Fell down the stairs according to the official report. But I was there. I saw my father push her. Elena's breath caught. Victor, I swore that day that I'd never let another man get away with that. Not if I could stop it. His arm tightened around her. So that's why I care.
That's why you're here. Because maybe I can't save everyone, but I can save you. They sat like that for a long time, the movie playing unwatched on the screen, the city lights glittering through the windows. Elena felt the fear start to recede, replaced by something else, something that felt dangerously like trust. "Thank you," she whispered. Victor didn't answer, just held her closer, and Elena closed her eyes and let herself believe, just for tonight, that maybe she'd actually found somewhere safe. The next morning dawned gray and cold, Chicago weather at its most miserable. Elena woke early, her new phone waiting on the nightstand with a sticky note in Maria's precise handwriting. "Your new number. Mr. DeLuca says use it wisely." The meeting was scheduled for 8 that evening, which gave Elena an entire day to spiral into anxiety. She tried to work, pulled up some design projects on her laptop, but couldn't focus. Victor was gone most of the day, handling business that Elena deliberately didn't ask about. Marco stopped by twice, checking security protocols that seemed paranoid until Elena remembered that Derek had already tracked her to her apartment. The stylist returned at 5 to help Elena get ready. The blue dress fit perfectly, showing off her figure without being obscene. Her hair was styled into soft waves, her makeup applied with professional precision. When Elena looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "You look beautiful," the stylist said, packing up her supplies. "He's a lucky man." Elena didn't bother correcting her. Let everyone think she and Victor were together. It was safer that way. Victor was waiting in the living room when she emerged, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her car. He looked her over with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You clean up nice," he said finally. "So do you." Elena smoothed down her dress, suddenly nervous. "Are you sure about this?" "No." Victor offered his arm. "But we're doing it anyway. Stay close to me, don't engage with Derek if he approaches, and trust that I know what I'm doing." "And if something goes wrong?" Victor's smile was dangerous. "Then we improvise." The meeting was held in a private room at one of Chicago's oldest restaurants, the kind of place with leather booths and waiters who'd worked there for decades. Victor guided Elena through the main dining room, his hand resting possessively on her lower back, and she felt every eye turn toward them. The whispers started immediately. "That's Victor DeLuca." "Who's the woman? Didn't she kiss him at the gala?" "Derek Hale must be losing his mind." They entered the private room, and Elena's stomach dropped. Derek was already there, standing near the bar with a drink in his hand, talking to an older man who had the same sharp features. His father, probably. Derek's eyes found Elena immediately, and the hatred in them was visceral. "Stay calm," Victor murmured. "He can't touch you here." The room was full of people Elena didn't recognize. Men in expensive suits, a few women who looked like they'd been brought as accessories. Victor introduced her to several associates, using words like "my guest" and "under my protection" that made their relationship clear without actually defining it. Derek watched from across the room, his jaw tight, his hands clenched around his glass. Elena could feel his anger like a physical force, pressing against her skin. Dinner was served. Multiple courses that Elena barely tasted. Victor sat beside her, carrying on conversations in multiple languages, always keeping one hand near hers on the table. A claim, a warning. Halfway through the main course, Derek finally made his move. "Victor," he said, approaching their table with his father in tow. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. James Hale. I work with Castellano Industries." Victor stood, shaking the older man's hand with polite indifference. "Mr. Hale, I've heard good things about your work. And I've heard interesting things about yours." James Hale's eyes moved to Elena, assessing. "Though I have to say, I'm surprised to see you with my son's girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," Elena said before Victor could respond. "We broke up months ago. That's not how Derek tells it." James's smile didn't reach his eyes. "He seems to think there's been some misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding." Victor's voice went cold. Elena made her choice clear. "Your son needs to accept that and move on." Derek stepped forward, his face flushed. "This is bullshit. You have no right." "I have every right." Victor didn't raise his voice, but something in his tone made Derek stop mid-sentence. "Elena is under my protection. That means she's off limits. To you, to your family, to anyone who thinks they can intimidate her. Are we clear?" The room had gone quiet, conversations dying as everyone turned to watch the confrontation. James Hale's expression hardened. Are you threatening my son? I'm clarifying the situation. Victor's gaze never left Derek's face. Your son has a habit of not understanding boundaries. I'm making sure he understands this one. You can't just steal someone's girlfriend. She's not property to be stolen. Victor's voice cut through Derek's protest like a blade. She's a person who made a choice. Respect it or deal with the consequences. Derek looked like he wanted to lunge across the table. His father put a hand on his arm, holding him back, but the fury in Derek's eyes promised that this wasn't over. This isn't finished, Derek said, directing the words at Elena. You think you can just walk away after everything we had? We didn't have anything. Elena found her voice, stronger than she expected. You had control, and I had fear. That's not a relationship. You ungrateful— Walk away. Victor's voice was soft, deadly. Now, before I make you. For a moment, Elena thought Derek would actually do it, would throw a punch or say something that would escalate the situation beyond repair. But his father's grip tightened, pulling him back, and Derek finally turned and stalked away, his shoulders rigid with rage. James Hale lingered for a moment, his expression calculating. My son may have some rough edges, but he cares about her. This isn't over, Mr. DeLuca. Yes, Victor said quietly. It is. The Hales left, and gradually the room came back to life, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Victor sat back down, his hand finding Elena's under the table. You okay? He asked quietly. Elena realized she was shaking again. I just told Derek off in front of his father and half of Chicago's business community. I don't know if I'm okay or having a nervous breakdown. You're okay. Victor's thumb traced circles on her palm. You were strong. He needed to see that. He's going to retaliate. Let him try. Victor's smile was grim. I'll be ready. They left the restaurant an hour later, Victor's hand never leaving her back as they navigated through the crowded dining room. Elena could feel eyes following them, whispers trailing in their wake. By tomorrow, everyone would know that she'd chosen Victor DeLuca over Derek Hale. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. In the car, Elena finally let herself breathe. That was awful. That was necessary. Victor loosened his tie, looking tired for the first time since she'd met him. Derek needed to see you standing beside me, not cowering. Now he knows what he's up against. What if that makes things worse? Then I handle it. Victor looked at her, his expression serious. Trust me, Elena. I've dealt with worse than Derek Hale. Elena wanted to believe him, but as they drove through Chicago's nighttime streets, she couldn't shake the memory of Derek's face, the pure hatred burning in his eyes, the promise of violence barely contained beneath his civilized veneer. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for tonight, sitting beside Victor in the safety of his car, Elena let herself pretend that maybe it could be. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that Elena hadn't expected. She woke early, usually to the sound of Victor already moving through the penthouse, conducting business in that low, authoritative voice that carried through walls. Maria made breakfast. Marco checked in daily, updating Victor on security measures Elena only half understood. And slowly, carefully, Elena began to reclaim pieces of herself she'd thought Derek had destroyed. She worked on design projects in the guest room turned office, her laptop propped on a desk that Maria had somehow procured overnight. Victor left her alone during work hours, respecting boundaries Elena hadn't even needed to establish. In the evenings, they ate dinner together, conversations gradually shifting from stilted politeness to something that almost felt natural. 3 weeks passed without incident. No angry texts from Derek, no surprise appearances, no threats. Elena started to believe that maybe Victor's display at the restaurant had actually worked, that Derek had finally understood she was serious about being done. She should have known better. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Elena was working on a logo redesign for a small business client, so absorbed in color palettes that she didn't hear Victor enter the office until he spoke. "We need to talk." She jumped, nearly knocking over her coffee. "You scared me." "Sorry." Victor didn't look sorry. He looked tense, the way he got when business calls went wrong. "Put your work away. This is important." Elena saved her files, closing the laptop slowly. "What happened?"
Victor crossed to the window, staring out at the city with his hands in his pockets. Derek's been busy. He's been talking to people, making calls, trying to find leverage. Leverage for what?
Against me. Against you. Against this whole situation.
Victor turned to face her, his expression grim.
He's connected with some of my competitors, people who'd love an excuse to make my life difficult. He's offering them information, access, whatever they want, if they'll help him get to you.
Elena's stomach dropped.
How do you know this?
Because I have people everywhere and they tell me things. Victor moved closer, his voice dropping.
Derek's desperate, Elena. Desperate men do stupid things, and stupid things get people killed.
So what do we do?
You stay here. You don't leave without security, you don't go anywhere alone, and you definitely don't trust anyone Derek might have gotten to.
Victor's jaw tightened.
I'm handling the competitor situation, but it's going to take time. Until then, we lock everything down.
Elena stood, her legs unsteady. This is my fault. If I hadn't kissed you that night. Don't. Victor's voice cut through her self-recrimination. You did what you needed to survive. Derek's the one escalating this. Derek's the one who can't accept that he lost. But people could get hurt because of me. People get hurt in my world all the time. Victor's expression softened slightly. That's not your fault. That's just reality.
Elena wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the walls closing in again. She'd traded one prison for another, even if this one had better furniture and a man who actually seemed to care whether she lived or died.
I hate this, she whispered. I hate that he still has this much power over my life.
Victor moved closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. He doesn't have power. He has desperation, and that's not the same thing. Power is what you have when you make a choice that terrifies you and follow through anyway. You have more power than you think. Elena looked up at him, this man who'd become something she couldn't quite define. Not a boyfriend, not a roommate, not exactly a protector. Something else. Something that made her heart beat faster when he stood this close.
Victor,
his phone rang, shattering the moment. Victor cursed softly, stepping back to answer it. What? Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Victor's expression go from tense to furious in seconds. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. I'm on my way. Lock it down until I get there. He hung up, already moving toward the door. I have to go. There's a situation at one of my properties. What kind of situation? The kind I need to handle personally. Victor stopped in the doorway, looking back at her. Marco's on his way. He'll stay with you until I get back. Don't leave the penthouse, don't answer the door for anyone except him, and keep your phone close.
Victor, you're scaring me.
Good. Be scared. Be careful. He hesitated, something flickering across his face that looked almost like regret.
I'll be back as soon as I can.
He was gone before Elena could respond, leaving her alone in the suddenly too quiet penthouse. She tried to go back to work, but her hands were shaking too badly to use the mouse. Instead, she paced the living room, watching the clock and jumping at every sound. Marco arrived 20 minutes later, looking grim and heavily armed. He positioned himself near the front door, checking his phone periodically, speaking in low tones to someone Elena couldn't hear.
Is Victor okay? She asked finally.
Boss can handle himself, Marco said, which wasn't really an answer. Elena made coffee she didn't drink, scrolled through news sites looking for information she wouldn't find, and tried not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Victor had been gone 2 hours when her new phone rang with an unknown number. Don't answer that, Marco said immediately, but Elena's finger was already moving, hitting the answer button before she could think better of it.
Elena?
Derek's voice poured through the speaker like poison.
I thought we should talk.
Her blood turned to ice. How did you get this number? I have my ways. He sounded pleased with himself, confident in a way that made her skin crawl. Your new boyfriend's not as careful as he thinks. Did you really believe you could just disappear? We have nothing to talk about. Elena's voice shook despite her best efforts. Leave me alone.
I can't do that. You're mine, Elena. You've always been mine.
Derek's tone shifted, taking on that edge of violence she remembered too well. Victor DeLuca thinks he can protect you? He's about to learn otherwise. Derek, don't. The line went dead. Marco was already on his phone, speaking rapidly. Boss, we've got a problem. Derek just called her new number. Elena couldn't hear Victor's response, but Marco's expression darkened. Understood. We'll be ready. What's happening? Elena demanded. Boss says Derek's making his move tonight. He wants us to... Marco stopped mid-sentence, his attention snapping to something Elena couldn't see. Get away from the windows, now. What? Why? The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Elena screamed, diving behind the couch as gunfire tore through the living room. Marco returned fire, his weapon barking in quick succession, shouting into his phone between shots. The noise was deafening, overwhelming, nothing like the sanitized violence of movies. This was chaos and terror, and the very real possibility of dying. Stay down! Marco yelled, but Elena was already pressed flat against the floor, her hands over her head, glass cutting into her palms. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. Elena heard running footsteps, Marco cursing viciously, then silence that felt worse than the noise. Are you hit? Marco appeared beside her, checking her for injuries with quick professional movements. Elena, look at me. Are you hurt? I don't think so. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. What just happened? Drive by. 3 shooters, probably hired. Marco helped her to her feet, guiding her away from the destroyed window. Come on, we need to move. They might come back. Where's Victor? On his way, but until he gets here, we're going to the safe room. The what? Marco didn't answer, just pulled her down the hallway to what she'd thought was a linen closet. He pressed something on the doorframe and the back wall slid open, revealing a reinforced room with monitors, supplies, and enough weapons to start a small war. Inside, Marco ordered. Elena stumbled into the safe room, her legs barely holding her up. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving her shaky and nauseous. Marco sealed the door behind them, immediately checking the monitors that showed different angles of the penthouse. How long do we stay here? Elena asked. Until the boss gives the all clear. Marco was still on his phone, updating someone on their status. You okay? You're white as a sheet. Someone just shot at me through a window. I don't think okay is really an option right now. Marco's expression softened slightly. First time getting shot at? Yeah, surprisingly that's never happened before. You handled it better than most. A lot of people freeze up, make themselves easy targets. He gestured to a chair. Sit down before you fall down. There's water in that cabinet if you need it. Elena sat, her hands still shaking. She could see blood on her palms from the glass, small cuts that stung now that she was paying attention to them. Everything felt surreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. 30 minutes crawled by. The monitors showed the penthouse looking like a war zone. Shattered glass, bullet holes in the walls, furniture torn apart. Maria appeared briefly, surveying the damage with a remarkable lack of emotion before disappearing again. Then Victor burst through the front door, gun drawn, flanked by 2 men Elena had never seen before. Marco immediately opened the safe room door. Boss, we're secure. Victor's gaze found Elena instantly, his expression shifting from cold fury to something else, something that looked almost like fear. Are you hurt? He was across the room in seconds, his hands on her face, tilting it up to check for injuries. Elena, talk to me. Are you hurt? I'm fine, just some cuts from the glass. Her voice cracked. Victor, they shot at us. They shot through your window. I know. Victor pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, and Elena felt the tension vibrating through him. This is my fault. I should have had more security, should have anticipated that Derek would... This isn't your fault. Elena's hands fisted in his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Derek did this. Derek and whoever he paid to pull those triggers. Victor pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. He's not going to get another chance. What does that mean? It means I'm done playing nice. Victor's voice was cold, controlled, the voice of a man who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed from it. Derek wanted a war? He's got one. Victor, no. You said you wouldn't kill him. I said I wouldn't kill him because you asked me not to. Victor's jaw tightened. But he just tried to have you murdered, Elena. He hired shooters to come to my home and gun you down. That changes things. I don't want his death on my conscience. Then it'll be on mine. Victor released her, stepping back. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you what's going to happen.
Derek Hale is going to learn what it costs to threaten what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it sent a different kind of shiver down Elena's spine, something she absolutely did not have time to examine right now. What about his father, his family? Elena pressed. If you kill Derek, they'll retaliate. Let them try. Victor's smile was dangerous. The Hales are connected, but they're not untouchable, and they're about to learn that protecting their son comes with consequences. Marco cleared his throat. Boss, we need to move her. This location's compromised. Already handled. I've got a property outside the city, secure location. Nobody knows about it except my inner circle. Victor's attention shifted back to Elena. Pack a bag. We leave in 20 minutes. We? You think I'm sending you anywhere without me after this? Victor's expression softened fractionally. You're stuck with me until this is finished, Elena. Better get used to it. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to protest that she wasn't some damsel who needed constant protection, but her hands were still shaking, and she could still hear the sound of gunfire in her head, and she was tired of pretending she was strong enough to handle this alone. 20 minutes, she agreed. Victor nodded, then turned to his men, issuing orders in rapid-fire Italian. Elena caught fragments, something about finding the shooters, tracking Derek's movements, making sure the Hales understood the price of their son's actions. Then Marco was guiding her back to her room, helping her pack essentials while avoiding the glass still scattered across the floor. The safe house was an hour outside Chicago, hidden at the end of a private road in what looked like dense forest. It was smaller than the penthouse, more rustic, with exposed wooden beams and furniture that looked comfortable rather than expensive. But the security was obvious, cameras everywhere, reinforced doors, windows that were probably bulletproof. Home sweet home, Victor said, carrying her bag inside. At least temporarily. Elena walked through the main room, taking in the fireplace, the leather couch, the kitchen that opened into the living space. How many safe houses do you have? Enough? Victor set her bag down, then moved to the windows, checking the perimeter with the practiced eye of someone who'd done this before. This one's off the books. My father bought it years ago as a hunting cabin. Nobody outside the family knows it exists. So we're safe here. As safe as anywhere. Victor finally looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. I'm sorry. I should have protected you better, should have seen this coming. Stop. Elena crossed to him, her hand finding his. You saved my life tonight. Marco got me to safety because you trained him to. This place exists because you planned for worst-case scenarios. You did protect me. You could have died. Victor's voice was rough. Those bullets came through the window you'd been standing by 5 minutes earlier. If you'd been there... But I wasn't. I'm here. I'm alive, and that's because of you. Elena squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses on his palms, the strength in his fingers. So stop blaming yourself and start telling me what happens next. Victor stared at their joined hands for a long moment. Then he pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, and Elena went willingly, letting herself be held by this violent, complicated man who'd somehow become her safest place. What happens next is I end this, Victor said into her hair. I find Derek. I make him understand what he's done, and I make sure he never threatens you again. Without killing him. I'll try. It wasn't a promise, but it was the best she was going to get. But if it comes down to his life or your safety, Elena, I'm choosing you every time. Elena tilted her head back to look at him. Why? Why do you care this much? Because somewhere between that kiss at the gala and watching you stand up to Derek at the restaurant, you stopped being just someone I was protecting. Victor's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. You became someone I can't imagine losing. The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, her body hyper-aware of how close Victor was, how his touch sent electricity down her spine. Victor. He kissed her. Not like the performative kiss at the gala. This was real, desperate, a claiming that had nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with the fear they'd both been holding back. Elena made a sound low in her throat, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. Victor backed her against the wall, one hand sliding into her hair, the other gripping her hip. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, all the tension and terror of the past few hours transforming into something else
something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he said, though he made no move to step back. "Why not?" "Because you're vulnerable right now, and I'm supposed to be protecting you, not kissing me?" Elena's hands were still twisted in his shirt. "Maybe I wanted you to." "Did you?" She answered by pulling him back down, kissing him again with a fierceness that surprised them both. This time, Victor didn't hold back, didn't try to be gentle or controlled. His hands mapped her body through her clothes, learning curves and angles, drawing sounds from her throat that she'd forgotten she could make. They stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes in a trail across the floor. Elena's hands shook as she worked the buttons of Victor's shirt, revealing scars she'd only glimpsed before, a roadmap of violence written on his skin. She traced them with her fingers, then her lips, feeling Victor's breath hitch. "Elena." Her name was a warning and a prayer. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Please don't stop." So he didn't. They fell into bed together, and for the first time in years, Elena felt something other than fear when a man touched her. Victor was careful despite the urgency between them, checking in with looks and touches, making sure she wanted this. And she did. Wanted it with an intensity that scared her, wanted to feel alive and present and connected to someone who saw her as more than property to be owned. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Elena's head on Victor's chest, his fingers trailing lazily up and down her spine. The cabin was quiet except for their breathing and the occasional creak of the old wood settling. "We probably shouldn't have done that," Elena said eventually. "Probably not." Victor's hand continued its path along her back. "Regretting it?" "No." She tilted her head to look at him. "Are you?" "Not even a little bit." Victor's expression was softer than she'd ever seen it, the hard edges smoothed away. "But it does complicate things." Things were already complicated. "Fair point." Victor shifted, pulling her closer. "Elena, I need you to understand something. What just happened? This isn't just physical for me. You're not just someone I'm protecting anymore." "What am I then?" Victor was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You're someone I want to keep safe, not because it's the right thing to do, but because the thought of something happening to you makes me want to burn the world down. That's dangerous. For both of us." Elena's throat tightened. "I know. I feel it too. This thing between us, it started with a desperate kiss at a gala, but it's become something else." Victor's hand came up to cradle her face. "Something real. And real things can hurt you worse than anything else. Then we'll deal with that when it happens." Elena leaned into his touch. "Right now, I just want to feel safe. Can you give me that?" "Yeah." Victor pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Yeah, I can give you that." They stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other in the quiet darkness, pretending that the world outside the cabin didn't exist, pretending that Derek wasn't still out there, planning his next move, pretending that this fragile thing between them could survive the violence that was coming. But Elena had learned enough about survival to know that sometimes pretending was all you had. So she let herself pretend, just for tonight, that everything would be okay. Victor's phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the peace. He cursed softly, reaching for it without letting go of Elena. "What?" His voice shifted instantly from gentle to cold. He listened for a moment, his expression hardening. "When? And they're sure it was him?" Elena sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "What's wrong?" Victor held up a hand, still listening. "No, keep eyes on the location. I want to know everyone who comes and goes. If Derek shows up, I want to hear about it immediately." He hung up, tossing the phone aside with more force than necessary. "Derek's at his father's estate," Victor said. "He's been there since the shooting, surrounded by private security. The Hales are circling their wagons. So we can't get to him." "I didn't say that." Victor's smile was dangerous. "I just said he's surrounded by security. But everyone has to leave sometime, and when he does, I'll be waiting." Elena wrapped her arms around her knees. "And then what? You kill him? His family retaliates? This never ends?" "It ends when Derek understands that you're not his to threaten anymore." Victor reached out, pulling her back against him. "Trust me, Elena. I've been doing this a long time. I know how to make problems disappear. I don't want you to become a monster because of me."
Victor's laugh was bitter. I've been a monster since I was 19 years old. This doesn't change that. But what it does change is that now I have a reason beyond power or territory. I'm doing this to protect you. That makes me a different kind of monster. Elena turned in his arms, her hand finding his face. You're not a monster. Yes, I am. Victor's expression was serious. And you need to understand that because the things I'm going to do to keep you safe, they're not going to be pretty. They're not going to be legal. And they're definitely not going to be something you can come back from once you know about them. Then don't tell me. Elena held his gaze. Do what you need to do, but don't make me carry it with you. Let me keep this version of you, the one who holds me and makes me feel safe. Don't show me the other parts. Victor studied her face for a long moment. You're asking me to lie to you. I'm asking you to protect me from the truth. Isn't that what you've been doing all along? He didn't answer, just pulled her close again, and Elena took that as agreement. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, two broken people finding temporary shelter in the eye of a storm that was far from over. The next morning, Elena woke to find Victor already up, dressed in dark clothes, checking weapons with the methodical focus of someone preparing for war. She watched from the bed, wrapped in sheets, as he loaded magazines and strapped on a shoulder holster. You're going after him, she said. Victor looked up, his expression unreadable. I'm going to have a conversation. What happens after that depends on Derek. Victor, stay here. Marco's outside and there's another team watching the perimeter. You'll be safe. He crossed to the bed, leaning down to kiss her. It was gentle, almost tender, completely at odds with the weapons strapped to his body. I'll be back before dark. Promise me you'll be careful. Always am. Victor straightened, heading for the door. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. Elena, don't say goodbye like you're not coming back. Her voice shook. Just go do what you need to do and come back to me. Victor's expression softened. I'll come back. That's a promise I can keep. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the cabin, with her fear and the growing certainty that whatever happened next would change everything. She got up, showered, dressed in clothes that felt wrong for a day spent waiting for news of violence. Marco brought her breakfast, said very little, then returned to his post outside. Elena tried to work, tried to read, tried to do anything that would keep her mind occupied. Hours crawled by. Her phone stayed silent. The cabin was too quiet. Every sound magnified, every creak of the floorboards making her jump. It was late afternoon when Victor finally returned. Elena heard the car first, then voices, then footsteps on the porch. She was on her feet before the door opened, her heart in her throat. Victor walked in looking exhausted and grim, blood on his knuckles, a cut above his eyebrow. But he was alive, he was walking, and when his eyes found hers, something in his expression shifted. It's done, he said simply. What's done? What happened? Victor moved to the sink, washing his hands with mechanical precision. Derek and I had our conversation. He understands now that you're off limits. He won't be bothering you anymore. Did you kill him? No. Victor dried his hands, turning to face her. But I made sure he understands what will happen if he tries anything else. His father understands too. The Hales are backing down. Elena wanted to ask for details, wanted to know exactly what Victor had done to make Derek back off. But she remembered her own words from last night, don't show me the other parts, and kept her questions to herself. So it's over? She asked instead. It's over. Victor crossed to her, his hands settling on her waist. You're safe, Elena. That's all that matters. She looked up at him, this man who'd become everything she'd never known she needed, and felt tears burn behind her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Victor's expression was serious. We still need to figure out what happens next. Now that Derek's not a threat, you don't need my protection anymore. You can go back to your life, get your own place again. Is that what you want? Elena interrupted. For me to leave? Victor was quiet for a moment. No, but I won't keep you here if you want to go. Elena's hands found his face, pulling him down until their foreheads touched. I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you and figure out what this thing between us actually is. Can we do that? Yeah. Victor's arms tightened around her. Yeah, we can do that. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the fading afternoon light.
Two people who'd found something unexpected in the middle of chaos and violence. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside the cabin, Elena finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found somewhere she could actually stay. They stayed at the cabin for another week, a deliberate isolation from the world and everything waiting for them back in Chicago. Victor made calls from the porch, his voice carrying through the windows in fragments Elena didn't try to piece together. She worked on design projects, cooked meals in the small kitchen with supplies Marco brought every other day, and slowly learned what it felt like to exist without fear as her constant companion. Nights were different. Nights belonged to them. To whispered conversations in the dark, to touches that started gentle and turned desperate, to learning each other's bodies and histories in equal measure. Victor told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the first time he'd killed someone and how it had changed him. Elena told him about the slow erosion of her self-worth under Derek's control, about the shame that still clung to her like smoke. "You didn't deserve what he did to you," Victor said one night, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "You know that, right?" "Most of the time." Elena turned to face him in the darkness. "But sometimes I wonder why I stayed so long. Why I let it get as bad as it did. Because leaving someone like Derek takes more courage than most people have." Victor's hand found her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You left 3 times before it stuck. That's not weakness. That's survival. Is that what you tell yourself? About the things you've done?" Victor was quiet for a moment. "No. What I've done, there's no justification for most of it. I chose this life, chose violence, chose power over everything else. But you? You were trying to love someone who turned out to be a monster. That's not the same thing." Elena pressed closer to him, seeking warmth and reassurance. "You're not a monster. We've had this conversation, and I'll keep having it until you believe me." She kissed his jaw, his throat, feeling his pulse jump under her lips. "You're a man who does monstrous things to protect what's his. That's different." "Semantics," Victor murmured, but his arms tightened around her. "Important semantics." Elena pulled back enough to look at him. "I need you to understand that I see the difference. I see you, Victor. Not the reputation, not the violence. You." Victor's expression shifted, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his face before he could mask it. "Elena?" She kissed him before he could finish, and the conversation dissolved into something wordless and urgent. Later, as they lay tangled together, both breathing hard, Elena felt something settle in her chest, something that felt dangerously like certainty. It was the morning of their 8th day at the cabin when Victor's phone rang with news that changed everything. Elena was making coffee, half listening to Victor's side of the conversation, when his tone shifted from businesslike to sharp. "Say that again?" A pause. "You're sure? How far along?" Elena turned, watching Victor's expression cycle through surprise, shock, and something that might have been fear. Her stomach dropped. Yeah, I understand. Don't tell anyone else yet. I'll handle it." He hung up, staring at the phone like it might explode. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Victor looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely uncertain. "That was Maria. She's been picking up supplies for us, including—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "She noticed you weren't using the tampons she'd been buying, so she picked up a pregnancy test, just in case." The room tilted. Elena set down her coffee mug before she dropped it. "What? When was your last period?" Elena tried to think, but her mind was spinning. I've been stressed. I thought maybe that's why." She pressed her hands to her face. "Oh my God." "Hey." Victor crossed to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "Breathe. We don't know anything for sure yet. But Maria thinks—" "Maria's cautious. That's why I trust her." Victor's voice was steady, grounding. "Let's not panic until we know something concrete. Marco's bringing the test with the next supply run. We'll figure this out." Elena nodded, but panic was already clawing up her throat. Pregnant. She could be pregnant. With Victor's child. A man she'd known for less than 2 months. A man whose life was built on violence and danger. A man who— "Stop spiraling," Victor said quietly. "I can see you doing it." "How am I supposed to not spiral?" "Victor, if I'm pregnant, then we deal with it." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world.
Together. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Whatever I decide. Elena looked up at him. You'd be okay with any choice I made? It's your body. Your decision. Victor's expression was serious. But for what it's worth, if you decide to keep it, if there even isn't it to keep, I'm not going anywhere. I meant what I said before. You're not just someone I'm protecting anymore. Elena's throat tightened. We barely know each other. We know enough. Victor pulled her against him, and Elena went willingly, needing the solid warmth of him. We know that whatever this thing between us is, it's real. We know that I'd do anything to keep you safe. And we know that if there's a kid involved, that kid's going to be protected and loved no matter what. You'd be a father. The words felt strange on her tongue. You'd want that? Victor was quiet for a moment, his hand moving slowly up and down her back. I never thought about kids before. My life, it's not exactly child-friendly, but the idea of a kid that's half you? Yeah, I could want that. Elena closed her eyes, letting herself imagine it. A child with Victor's dark hair and her smile, teaching them to be strong but not cruel, protective but not violent, building something good out of the chaos they'd stumbled into. It was terrifying. It was impossible. It was the only thing she could suddenly think about. Marco arrived 2 hours later with supplies and a paper bag he handed to Victor without comment. Victor brought it to Elena, who'd been pacing the bedroom for the past hour, trying not to hyperventilate. You want me to stay or go? Victor asked. Stay. Elena took the bag with shaking hands. I can't do this alone. She locked herself in the bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test like it might bite her. The instructions were simple enough. 3 minutes for results. 3 minutes to find out if her entire life was about to change. Elena followed the instructions mechanically, then set the test on the counter and opened the door. Victor was leaning against the wall outside, arms crossed, trying to look calm and failing. Now we wait, Elena said. How long? 3 minutes. Victor checked his watch. Longest 3 minutes of your life, probably. You have no idea. Elena leaned against the opposite wall, facing him across the narrow hallway. What if it's positive? Then we figure it out. That's not a plan. It's the only plan I've got right now. Victor's mouth curved slightly. I'm making this up as I go, Elena. I don't have a playbook for what to do when the woman you're falling for might be pregnant after knowing each other for 6 weeks. Elena's breath caught. You're falling for me? Don't act surprised. You've been here the whole time. Victor pushed off the wall, closing the distance between them. Yeah, I'm falling for you. Have been since you stood up to Derek at that restaurant. Maybe even before that. I'm falling for you too, Elena whispered. That probably makes me crazy. Makes both of us crazy. Victor's hand found hers, their fingers interlacing. But I'm okay with that. Elena's watch beeped. 3 minutes. They stared at each other for a long moment, neither moving. You want me to check? Victor asked. We'll check together. Elena squeezed his hand. On 3, 1, 2. They moved to the bathroom as one, standing in the doorway, both staring at the test sitting on the counter. 2 pink lines, clear and unmistakable, positive. Elena's knees went weak. Victor's arm came around her waist, holding her up, his other hand gripping the doorframe like he needed the support too. Okay, Victor said finally. Okay. Okay? Elena turned to look at him. That's all you've got? Okay? What do you want me to say? Victor's voice was rough. That I'm terrified? That I have no idea how to be a father? That the thought of bringing a kid into my world makes me want to burn everything down and start over? He pulled her closer. All of that's true. But it's also true that if this is happening, then it's happening, and we're going to figure it out together. Elena pressed her face against his chest, feeling tears start to fall. I'm scared. I know. Me too. Victor's hand cradled the back of her head. But we're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. How can you know that? Because I won't allow anything else. Victor's voice turned fierce. You and this kid, you're mine now. And I protect what's mine. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the small bathroom, trying to process a future they hadn't planned for but couldn't ignore. Eventually, Victor guided her back to the bedroom,
tucking her into bed like she might break, then climbed in beside her. "We should probably see a doctor," Elena said. "Make sure everything's okay. I'll set it up. Private practice. Someone I trust."
Victor's hand found her stomach, settling there with a gentleness that made Elena's throat tight. "How do you feel? About this? Really?" Elena thought about it, sorting through the fear and shock to find what was underneath. Scared. But also, I don't know. Like maybe this is supposed to happen. Like maybe this is what I've been running toward instead of away from. That's the most optimistic thing I've ever heard you say.
"Don't get used to it. I'm sure the panic will be back by morning." Elena covered his hand with hers. "What about you? How do you really feel?" Victor was quiet for so long Elena thought he might not answer. Then he said, "When my mother died, I swore I'd never have a family. Never give my father the satisfaction of continuing his legacy, never risk bringing a kid into the kind of violence I live with every day. I've spent 30 years making sure that promise stayed kept. And now I'm looking at breaking that promise for you." Victor's voice was soft, almost wondering. "And the weird thing is, I don't hate the idea. I should. I should be trying to figure out how to walk away, how to make sure this kid grows up far away from me and everything I represent. But I can't. I don't want to." "You don't have to walk away." Elena shifted to look at him in the dim light. "Unless you want to." "I don't want to." Victor's hand tightened on her stomach. "I want to stay and figure out how to be better than my father was. Better than Derek. Better than every man who's ever hurt a woman or a kid. I want to try." "Then try." Elena kissed him softly. "We'll both try. We'll probably screw it up 100 different ways, but we'll try." "Deal." Victor pulled her closer, and they lay like that until sleep claimed them both. The next morning, Elena woke to an empty bed and the sound of Victor's voice carrying from the main room. She got up slowly, one hand pressed to her still flat stomach, and followed the sound. Victor was on the phone, pacing the living room, his tone sharp. "I don't care what his father says. The deal's off. We're not doing business with the Hales anymore." A pause. "Because I said so, and that's the only explanation you're getting." He hung up, turning to find Elena watching from the doorway. "Cutting ties with Derek's family?" she asked. "Completely. I've pulled out of every joint venture, every partnership, everything that connects me to them." Victor pocketed his phone. "They're going to be pissed, but I don't care. I'm not having my kid grow up anywhere near that family." "Your kid?" Elena tested the words. "That's real now. We're really doing this."
"Yeah." Victor crossed to her, his hand settling on her waist. "We're really doing this. And that means changes. A lot of them." "What kind of changes?" Victor guided her to the couch, sitting beside her. "I need to start moving away from the more violent parts of my business. I can't be a father who comes home covered in blood. That's not—" He stopped, struggling with the words. "That's not the man I want to be for this kid." Elena felt something crack open in her chest. "You'd do that? Change your whole life?" "Not my whole life, just the parts that would make our kid ashamed of me when they're old enough to understand." Victor's expression was serious. "I'm not walking away from everything. I can't. My organization is still mine, and I still have responsibilities. But I can be smarter about it. Delegate the worst parts. Focus on the legitimate businesses I've been building on the side." "You have legitimate businesses?" "Real estate, some import-export operations, a few restaurants." Victor's mouth curved slightly. "I'm not just a thug, Elena. I've been preparing for retirement for years. I just didn't have a reason to actually pull the trigger until now." Elena leaned against him, trying to wrap her mind around this version of their future. "What about the penthouse? Is it safe to go back?" "Eventually, but we're not going back to the way things were." Victor's arm came around her shoulders. "I'm buying us a house, something with a yard, good schools nearby, space for a kid to grow up. Somewhere that doesn't have bulletproof windows and a safe room." "That sounds—" Elena's voice cracked. "That sounds nice. Really nice." "Don't cry." Victor sounded almost panicked. "Why are you crying? Is something wrong?" "No, you idiot. I'm crying because you're talking about houses with yards and good schools, and it's the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me." Elena wiped at her eyes, laughing through the tears. "Pregnancy hormones. Get used to it."
Great. But Victor was smiling, pulling her into his lap, his hand finding her stomach again. How long until we can tell if it's a boy or a girl? A while. Few months, probably. Elena curled into him. Do you have a preference? Healthy. That's my only preference. Victor pressed a kiss to her temple. Everything else is just details. They spent the rest of the morning making plans, tentative, hopeful plans about doctors and houses, and how to tell Maria, who was apparently going to be thrilled. Elena felt the fear start to recede, replaced by something that felt almost like joy. Around noon, Marco knocked on the door with news that made Victor's expression go cold. Boss, we've got a situation. Derek's father is at the property line, says he wants to talk. Victor stood, his entire demeanor shifting. About what? He didn't say. Just that it's urgent, and it concerns Elena. Marco glanced at her. You want me to send him away? No. Victor's jaw tightened. If James Hale came all the way out here, he's got something to say. I want to hear it. He looked at Elena. Stay inside. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Victor, please. His expression softened fractionally. I need to know you're safe. Just stay inside. Elena nodded reluctantly, and Victor followed Marco outside. She moved to the window, watching as a black car pulled up the drive. James Hale emerged, looking older than she remembered, his face drawn. The two men talked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Elena couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. Tension, anger, eventually something that looked almost like resignation. James handed Victor something, an envelope maybe, then got back in his car and left. Victor stood in the driveway for a long moment after the car disappeared, staring at whatever James had given him. Then he turned and walked back to the cabin. What happened? Elena asked the moment he came through the door. Victor held up the envelope. James came to apologize and to give us this. What is it? A legal document. Derek's signing away any claim to you, restraining order, no contact agreement, the whole thing. James is making sure it's enforced. Victor's expression was unreadable. Apparently, after our conversation last week, Derek had a breakdown. He's in a psychiatric facility upstate. James wanted us to know that Derek won't be a problem anymore. Elena sank onto the couch, trying to process this. Derek's in a psych ward? Voluntary commitment, from what James said. Derek finally admitted he needed help. Victor sat beside her, still holding the envelope. This is over, Elena. Really over. Derek's getting treatment, his family's backing off, and we're legally protected from any future contact. That's... Elena didn't know how to finish that sentence. Relief? Victory? It felt too easy, too clean. You believe him, James? I believe that James Hale loves his son enough to actually try to fix him instead of just covering up his problems. Victor set the envelope aside. And I believe that the conversation Derek and I had made a lasting impression. He's scared of me, scared enough to actually face his issues. Elena leaned against him, feeling the last knot of tension in her chest start to unravel. So, we're safe. We're safe. Victor's hand found her stomach again, that protective gesture that was already becoming habit. You, me, and this kid. We're safe, and we're going to build something good. I promise you that. I believe you. And the strange thing was, Elena did believe him. This man who'd killed people, who ran a criminal empire, who'd terrified her ex-boyfriend into therapy. She believed he'd do exactly what he promised, because Victor DeLuca didn't make promises he couldn't keep. That night, they made love slowly, carefully, Victor treating her like she might shatter despite her protests that she wasn't made of glass. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Elena felt the future settle around them like a blanket. What are we going to tell people? She asked. About us? About how we met? The truth. Victor's voice was drowsy. We met at a gala. You kissed me, and I decided you were worth keeping around. That's a terrible story. It's our story. Victor pulled her closer. And I kind of love it. Elena smiled against his chest. Me too. They stayed at the cabin for another few days, but the urgency was gone now. Derek was locked away. The threats were neutralized, and they could start planning an actual future instead of just surviving day to day. Victor made calls about houses and doctors, and gradually shifting his business operations. Elena reached out to her few friends, testing the waters of her old life to see what still fit. On their last morning at the cabin, Elena woke before Victor. She slipped out of bed and stood at the window, watching the sun rise over the trees, one hand resting on her stomach. 6 weeks ago, she'd been trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Now she was pregnant with a mob boss's baby, planning a future that should have terrified her, but instead felt like the first real choice she'd made in years. "You're thinking too loud," Victor murmured from the bed. Elena turned to find him watching her, his hair messed from sleep, his expression soft. "Just trying to figure out how I got here." "You kissed me at a gala." Victor sat up, stretching. "And then you decided to stick around despite every red flag telling you to run. Best bad decision I ever made." Elena moved back to the bed, climbing in beside him. "What time are we leaving?" "Noon. Marco's got the penthouse secured, and Maria's already there preparing for our return." Victor's hand found hers. "You ready to go back to reality?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Elena laced their fingers together. "What's reality going to look like now?" "Different." Victor kissed her knuckles. "Better, if I have anything to say about it. We'll find that house, set up your office so you can work from home, start getting ready for this kid. Normal stuff. Normal stuff for a crime boss and his girlfriend. Normal stuff for a man and a woman who are trying to build a life together." Victor's expression was serious. "That's what we are, Elena. Under all the complications and history and violence, we're just two people who found each other at the right moment." Elena thought about that first night, standing in the ballroom with fear choking her, seeing Victor across the room and making the most reckless decision of her life, walking up to a man everyone feared and asking for help. "The right moment," she repeated. "Yeah, I think you're right." They packed up the cabin in comfortable silence, erasing their presence from the space until it looked like no one had been there at all. Marco loaded their bags into the car, while Victor did a final perimeter check, old habits dying hard. "Boss, Marco said as they were climbing into the car. "For what it's worth, I'm glad things worked out. Elena's good for you." Victor's expression softened. "Yeah, she is." The drive back to Chicago felt like traveling between worlds. The cabin had been a bubble, a space outside time where they could figure things out without external pressure. Now they were returning to reality, to Victor's organization and Elena's career and all the complications of actually building a life together. But as they crossed the city limits, Elena didn't feel afraid. She felt ready to face whatever came next with this complicated, violent, surprisingly gentle man beside her. The penthouse looked the same, but felt different. New windows, no sign of the bullet holes, everything cleaned and repaired. Maria greeted them at the door with a knowing look and a tight hug for Elena. "I had a feeling," she said quietly. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Elena hugged her back, grateful for the acceptance. "Your old room's ready, but..." Maria glanced at Victor. "I'm assuming you'll be sharing the master bedroom now?" "Yeah." Victor said it firmly, no room for argument. "Move Elena's things. She stays with me." That night, settling into Victor's bed instead of the guest room, Elena felt the last piece click into place. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was exactly where she wanted to be. "Hey," Victor said, pulling her close. "You okay? You've been quiet." "I'm good." Elena kissed him softly. "I'm really, really good." "Good." Victor's hand found her stomach, that protective gesture that was already second nature. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start looking at houses." "Houses with yards." "Houses with yards," Victor confirmed. "And good schools, and whatever else you want. Sky's the limit." Elena closed her eyes, letting herself imagine it. A house, a family. A future built on something other than fear and violence. It seemed impossible, but so had everything else that had happened in the past 2 months. As she drifted off to sleep, safe in Victor's arms, Elena thought about that desperate kiss at the gala, about how a single moment of reckless courage had changed everything. She'd do it again in a heartbeat. The first doctor's appointment came 3 weeks after they'd returned to Chicago. Elena sat in the waiting room of a private practice in an unmarked building, Victor beside her, his knee bouncing with barely contained anxiety. She'd never seen him nervous before. It was oddly comforting. "You okay?" she asked, squeezing his hand. "Fine." Victor's knee kept bouncing. "Just not used to waiting rooms." When was the last time you saw a doctor? Define saw a doctor. At her look, Victor grimaced. I have a guy who stitches me up when necessary. Does that count? No, that doesn't count. Elena shook her head, but she was smiling. You're going to have to get used to actual medical facilities. Kids have a lot of appointments. I'll manage. Victor's hand tightened on hers. As long as they tell us everything's okay. A nurse called Elena's name before she could respond. The exam room was small, sterile, exactly like every other medical office Elena had been in. The doctor was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor who'd clearly dealt with Victor's type before. She didn't flinch when he insisted on staying in the room, didn't comment on the way he hovered protectively. The ultrasound was surreal. Elena lay on the exam table, Victor standing beside her, both of them staring at the grainy black and white image on the screen. The doctor moved the wand across Elena's stomach, her expression focused. There, she said, pointing to a small bean-shaped blob. That's your baby. About 8 weeks along from what I can see. Heartbeat looks strong. The sound filled the room, a rapid whooshing that seemed impossibly fast. Elena felt tears start to fall, and when she looked at Victor, his expression was completely unguarded. Wonder and fear and something that looked like reverence all mixed together. That's... Victor's voice cracked. That's really our kid? That's really your baby. The doctor smiled, clearly used to this reaction. Everything looks good so far. Healthy development, no immediate concerns. I'll print out some images for you to take home. Elena couldn't stop staring at the screen. That tiny blob was going to become a person, her and Victor's child. The enormity of it was overwhelming. After the appointment, they sat in Victor's car in the parking garage, neither moving. Victor held the ultrasound photos like they might disintegrate. We're having a baby, he said, like he was trying to convince himself it was real. We're having a baby, Elena confirmed. Her hand found her stomach, still flat, but not for much longer. Are you freaking out? Completely. Victor looked at her, his expression raw. But in a good way, I think. Is there a good way to freak out about this? I think so. Elena leaned over the center console to kiss him. We're going to be terrible at this sometimes. You know that, right? We're going to mess up and fight and have no idea what we're doing. Probably. Victor tucked one of the ultrasound photos into his wallet, handling it with surprising care. But we'll figure it out, together, like we've been doing with everything else. Together, Elena repeated. I like the sound of that. The house hunting started that weekend. Victor had very specific requirements. Gated community, good security, close to top-rated schools, enough space for Elena's office and a nursery and whatever else they might need. Elena had her own requirements, natural light, a real kitchen, somewhere that felt like a home instead of a fortress. They looked at a dozen properties before finding it. A 2-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood, brick exterior with white trim, a yard that would be perfect for a swing set someday. The real estate agent clearly thought they were an odd couple. Victor in his expensive suit, Elena in jeans and a sweater that was starting to get tight around the middle. But she was smart enough not to comment. What do you think? Victor asked as they stood in what would be the nursery. The room had windows facing east, morning light streaming through. Elena turned slowly, taking it in. I think it's perfect. Yeah? Victor moved behind her, his arms coming around her waist, hands settling on her stomach. You can really see us here? I can see us here. I can see our kid here, learning to walk in that hallway, playing in the yard. Elena covered his hands with hers. I can see a life here, Victor, a real one. Then it's ours. Victor kissed her temple. I'll handle the paperwork this week. We can move in next month, have time to get everything set up before the baby comes. The agent looked thrilled when Victor made an offer on the spot, well over asking price, cash deal. They signed preliminary papers in the kitchen, Elena's hand shaking slightly as she wrote her name next to Victor's. This was real. They were buying a house, building a life, creating something permanent. That night, back at the penthouse, Victor made phone calls while Elena sketched nursery ideas. She could hear fragments of his conversations, something about legitimate businesses, about restructuring operations, about promotions for people whose names she didn't recognize. Victor was making good on his promise to step back from the violence, and it showed in the tension that lived in his shoulders these days. How's it going? Elena asked when he finally emerged from his office, looking exhausted. Slowly. Victor poured himself a drink, then seemed to think better of it and set the glass down untouched. Turning a criminal empire into something legitimate takes time. A lot of people aren't happy about the changes. Are they going to be a problem? Not if they want to keep working for me. Victor sat beside her on the couch, pulling her feet into his lap. I made it clear. Anyone who doesn't like the new direction can leave. But if they stay, they follow my rules. No unnecessary violence, no high-risk operations, everything by the book as much as possible. And they're listening? Most of them. The ones who matter. Victor's hands worked at her feet, finding knots she hadn't known were there. Marco's been helpful. He gets what I'm trying to do, why it matters. Having him on board makes the transition easier. Elena watched him massage her feet, this man who'd killed people now being so careful and gentle with her. You're really doing this, changing your whole life. I told you I would. Victor looked up, meeting her eyes. I meant it, Elena. I'm not bringing a kid into the world I've been living in. That's not negotiable. Even though it's hard? Especially because it's hard. Victor's expression was serious. My father raised me in violence, taught me that power was the only thing that mattered, that fear was how you kept people in line. I'm not doing that to our kid. They're going to grow up knowing there's another way. Elena's throat tightened. You're going to be a good father. I hope so. Victor's hands stilled on her feet. But I'm scared I won't be. That I'll mess it up. That all my father's lessons are too deep to unlearn. Then we unlearn them together. Elena pulled her feet back, shifting to straddle his lap. You think I'm not scared? I grew up watching my mother stay with a man who didn't love her, who barely noticed she existed. Then I repeated the pattern with Derek. I'm terrified I'll teach our kid all the wrong things about love and relationships. Victor's hands settled on her hips, holding her steady. So we learn better. We teach them better. We show them what it looks like when two imperfect people choose each other every day and do the work to make it stick. Is that what we're doing? Choosing each other every day? Yeah. Victor's voice was rough. That's exactly what we're doing. Elena kissed him, slow and deep, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, Victor carried her to bed, and they made love with a tenderness that felt like promise. The pregnancy progressed with remarkable normalcy. Elena's body changed in ways that fascinated and terrified her. Victor became obsessive about her health, monitoring her nutrition and sleep schedule like a drill sergeant until Elena threatened to move back to the guest room if he didn't back off. They compromised. Victor could hover, but he had to hover quietly. The move to the new house happened in early April, when Elena was 4 months along and just starting to show. Maria supervised the movers with military precision, while Victor carried boxes and tried not to be too obvious about checking the security system every 20 minutes. Elena unpacked kitchen supplies and hung curtains and gradually transformed the empty house into something that felt like home. This is weird, she said one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway watching Victor assemble a crib in what would be the nursery. Good weird, but weird. What's weird? Victor didn't look up from the instructions, his brow furrowed in concentration. Domestic life suits you. I wouldn't have guessed that 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have guessed it either. Victor finally looked up, smiling slightly. But here we are. Me putting together baby furniture while you make dinner could be worse. Could be better too. Elena moved to stand beside him, looking down at the half-assembled crib. This is backwards. The side rail goes the other way. No, it doesn't. Victor checked the instructions again, then cursed softly. Yeah, okay, it does. How did you know that? Because I actually read the instructions instead of just looking at the pictures. Elena kissed his cheek. Want help? Please. Victor handed her a screwdriver. Between this and the changing table, I'm starting to think we should have just hired someone. Where's the fun in that? Elena knelt beside him, sorting through hardware. Besides, this is good practice. We're going to be putting together a lot of things in the next 18 years. They worked in comfortable silence, the crib slowly taking shape beneath their hands. Outside, the sun set over their new neighborhood, painting the nursery in shades of gold and pink. Elena felt something settle in her chest, a contentment she'd never quite experienced before. I love you, she said suddenly. Victor's hands stilled. He turned to look at her, surprise and something deeper flickering across his face. Say that again. I love you.
Elena set down her screwdriver, meeting his gaze steadily. I know we haven't said it yet, and maybe it's too soon, but I do. I love you, Victor. It's not too soon. Victor pulled her into his lap, crib forgotten. I love you too. Have for a while now, just didn't know how to say it. You just did. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck. That wasn't so hard, was it?
Terrifying, actually. But Victor was smiling, really smiling, the kind that reached his eyes and made him look years younger. But worth it. They finished the crib later, after getting sidetracked by kisses and whispered confessions and the kind of intimate conversation that comes from finally saying what you've been holding back. When it was done, they stood back to admire their work. A simple white crib that would soon hold their child. We're really doing this, Elena said, her hand finding Victor's. Yeah. Victor's arm came around her shoulders. We really are. The gender reveal came at 20 weeks. They decided to find out together, to make it a moment just for them instead of some elaborate party. The doctor handed them an envelope, and they drove to the cabin, their cabin now, the place where everything had changed, to open it. They sat on the porch, the envelope between them, both hesitating. You want to guess first? Victor asked. Boy. Elena said it without thinking. I think it's a boy. Girl, Victor countered. Definitely a girl. Only one way to find out. Elena picked up the envelope, her hands shaking slightly. Ready? Ready. She tore it open, pulling out the single sheet of paper. The words seemed to jump off the page. Boy. I was right, Elena said, stunned. We're having a son. Victor took the paper from her, staring at it like he couldn't quite believe it. A son. His voice was rough. We're having a son. Elena watched emotions play across his face, joy, fear, determination, love. She knew what he was thinking, about his father, about the legacy he'd inherited, about breaking cycles that had held his family for generations. He's going to be nothing like your father, Elena said quietly, and everything like you, the good parts, the parts you've been showing me since the day we met. The good parts are new. Victor set the paper aside, pulling Elena close. But I'll find more of them. For him. For you. I'll be better than what I came from. You already are. Elena pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. You already are, Victor. They sat on that porch until the sun set, talking about names and futures and the little boy who would change everything. Elena felt the baby move for the first time that night, a flutter like butterflies that made her gasp and grab Victor's hand, pressing it to her stomach until he felt it too. That's him, Victor whispered, wonder in his voice. That's our son. That's our son, Elena confirmed. The remaining months of pregnancy flew by in a blur of doctor's appointments and nursery preparations, and Victor gradually extracting himself from the darker corners of his business. Marco took over more operations. Trusted lieutenants stepped into leadership roles, and slowly the organization transformed into something that could operate without bloodshed. It wasn't seamless. There were challenges, power struggles, people who couldn't accept the new order and had to be removed. But Victor handled it with a focus Elena had never seen before. He was building something better, not just for himself, but for the family he was creating. Elena's design business flourished in unexpected ways. Working from home gave her flexibility, and clients were surprisingly understanding about her pregnancy. She built a portfolio that attracted bigger projects, more interesting work, clients who paid well and respected her expertise. For the first time in her adult life, she felt successful on her own terms. They had dinner with Marco one night in August, Elena 7 months pregnant and exhausted, Victor hovering like she might spontaneously combust. Marco brought news about Derek. He'd been released from the psychiatric facility and had moved to California, starting over somewhere far from Chicago and his family's influence. He's doing better, from what I hear, Marco said, carefully neutral. Working with a therapist, staying away from relationships until he gets his shit together. His family's keeping tabs on him. Good, Elena said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. I'm glad he's getting help. Nobody deserves to be trapped by their own demons. Victor's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. They'd come so far from that night at the gala, when desperation and violence had seemed like the only options. Now Derek was healing, they were building a life, and the cycle had actually broken instead of just repeating. The baby came 3 weeks early, on a Tuesday afternoon in September. Elena had been working on a logo design when her water broke. Victor had been in a meeting with accountants about some legitimate business acquisition. Marco had driven them to the hospital with the kind of speed that probably should have gotten them pulled over but somehow didn't. Labor was nothing like the movies made it look. It was long and painful and exhausting, Victor holding her hand through all of it, whispering encouragements and letting her squeeze his fingers until they went white. The doctor stayed calm, the nurses were efficient, and after 19 hours that felt like an eternity, their son entered the world screaming his displeasure at the sudden change in accommodations. "He's perfect," the doctor said, placing the tiny squirming bundle on Elena's chest. "Congratulations." Elena looked down at her son, their son, his face red and scrunched up, his tiny hands waving in indignation. He had dark hair like Victor, and when he finally opened his eyes, they were the same gray-green as Elena's. "Hi," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, baby. We've been waiting for you." Victor stood beside the bed, one hand on Elena's shoulder, the other touching their son's head with a gentleness that made Elena's heart crack open. When she looked up at him, his face was wet with tears he wasn't even trying to hide. "He's so small," Victor said, his voice breaking. "How is he so small?" 7 pounds, 5 ounces, the nurse announced. "Good size for early. Nice strong lungs, too, from the sound of it." Their son continued to scream, unimpressed with the world he'd been thrust into. Elena tried to soothe him, but nothing worked until Victor carefully, tentatively, reached down to pick him up. The moment Victor held him, skin to skin, the baby quieted. His eyes opened wider, focusing on Victor's face with the kind of intense attention that newborns sometimes managed. And Victor looked at his son like he'd been handed the entire universe and told to be careful with it. "Hey," Victor murmured. "Hey, buddy. I'm your dad. I know this is all weird and scary right now, but I promise I'm going to take care of you. You're safe, you're loved, and I'm going to spend every day making sure you know that." Elena watched them, this violent man holding their tiny son with infinite care, and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the world. Love didn't erase the past. It didn't make Victor's history disappear or undo the things Derek had done to her. But it built something new on top of the ruins, something worth protecting. "What are we naming him?" Victor asked, not taking his eyes off their son. They'd had a list, but now that Elena saw him, really saw him, only one name felt right. "Noah," she said. "Noah Victor DeLuca." Victor looked at her, surprise and emotion flooding his expression. "You want to give him my name?" "He's your son. Our son. Of course he gets your name." Elena reached out to touch Noah's tiny hand, watching his fingers curl reflexively around hers. "Noah means rest, peace. That's what I want for him. Peace that neither of us had growing up." "Noah," Victor repeated, testing it. "I like it. It suits him." Noah chose that moment to start crying again, apparently unimpressed with their naming conversation. The nurse took him gently, showing Elena how to nurse, and Victor sat beside the hospital bed, looking shell-shocked and overwhelmed and happier than Elena had ever seen him. They stayed in the hospital for 2 days, learning how to care for this tiny person who depended on them for everything. Victor was surprisingly good at diaper changes, though he approached each one with the same focus he'd once used for business negotiations. Elena struggled with nursing at first, frustrated and exhausted, until a patient lactation consultant helped her figure it out. Marco visited, bringing flowers and a teddy bear that was almost as big as Noah. Maria showed up with home-cooked meals and practical advice about sleep schedules. Even some of Victor's business associates stopped by, bringing gifts and congratulations, treating this like the significant event it was. When they finally brought Noah home, the house felt different, full in a way it hadn't been before. Victor carried the car seat like it contained explosives, so careful Elena almost laughed. She was sore and tired and overwhelmed, but when they walked through the front door of their house with their son, everything felt right. The first weeks were brutal. Noah cried at all hours. Elena was exhausted from nursing, and Victor was trying to balance his business obligations with being present for his new family. They fought sometimes, snapping at each other over small things because they were too tired to handle conflict gracefully. But they also learned Noah's cries, learned to work as a team, learned that love was as much about showing up in the hard moments as it was about the easy ones. "I'm sorry," Victor said one night after a particularly rough argument about whether Noah needed to go to the doctor for a minor rash. I'm trying not to be controlling, but every time something's wrong with him, I panic. I know. Elena shifted Noah to her other arm, rocking him gently. But you have to trust me too. Trust that I'm not going to let anything happen to him, that we're in this together. I do trust you. Victor ran a hand through his hair, looking exhausted. I never thought I'd have this. A family. Someone who matters more than anything else. It scares me how much I love you both. It scares me too. Elena reached out and Victor came to sit beside her on the couch, his hand finding Noah's head. But that's okay. We get to be scared together. They sat like that, their son sleeping between them, and figured it out. One day at a time, one crisis at a time, one small victory at a time. When Noah was 3 months old, Victor made his final major change. He announced to his organization that he was stepping back from day-to-day operations, promoting Marco to handle most business decisions while Victor focused on the legitimate ventures that had been his exit strategy all along. Some people grumbled, but most understood. Victor DeLuca had earned the right to retire from the violent parts of his empire. How does it feel? Elena asked that night, watching Victor hold Noah while she made dinner. Being done with that life? Strange. Victor adjusted Noah's position, supporting his head carefully. But good. I spent 30 years building something I'm now walking away from. But when I look at him, he glanced down at their son, who was staring up at him with solemn attention. When I look at him, I know I made the right choice. Noah was 6 months old when they got unexpected news. James Hale had died. Heart attack, sudden and fatal. Derek had flown back for the funeral, and through the complicated network that still connected their worlds, Victor heard that Derek was doing well. Still in therapy, still working on himself, still staying far away from Chicago and the life he'd lived there. Do you ever think about him? Victor asked one evening after they'd put Noah to bed. About what your life would have been like if you'd never left? Elena thought about it, really thought about it. I think I'd be dead or broken. Probably both. Derek was destroying me piece by piece, and I was letting him because I didn't know there was another option. She moved closer to Victor on the couch, tucking herself against his side. I don't wish him harm, but I'm grateful every day that I found the courage to walk away and walk straight toward a mob boss. Victor's arm came around her shoulders. That takes a special kind of crazy, or a special kind of desperate. Elena tilted her head to look at him. But it worked out, didn't it? Against all odds, it actually worked out. Yeah. Victor kissed her temple. It really did. Noah's first birthday came faster than seemed possible. They threw a small party, Maria, Marco, a few of Elena's friends, some of Victor's business associates who'd become genuine friends during the transition away from violence. Noah smashed a cake with enthusiastic destruction, his face covered in frosting, his laugh infectious. Elena watched Victor chase their son around the backyard, both of them laughing, and felt tears prick her eyes. 2 years ago, she'd been trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Now she had this, a home, a family, a man who loved her, and a son who was growing up surrounded by safety and affection. You look happy, Marco said, appearing beside her with a beer. I am happy. Elena wiped at her eyes, laughing at herself. Stupidly, impossibly happy. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. Marco's expression was serious. Boss made sure of that. He burned a lot of bridges, made a lot of enemies, all to make sure you and Noah are protected. You're his whole world now. I know. Elena watched Victor scoop Noah up, tossing him in the air while their son shrieked with delight. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. Believe it. Marco clinked his beer against her glass. You earned this, Elena. Both of you did. That night, after everyone had left and Noah was asleep, Elena and Victor sat on their back porch, watching the stars come out over their neighborhood. We should get married, Victor said suddenly. Elena turned to look at him. What? Married. You and me. Legally binding, whole ceremony, whatever you want. Victor took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I want you to be my wife, not just my girlfriend or Noah's mother. I want it official. Are you proposing to me? Yeah, I guess I am. Victor smiled slightly.
Not doing a great job of it, am I? I don't have a ring. I didn't plan some elaborate thing. I don't need elaborate. Elena moved to straddle his lap, her hands framing his face. I just need you, and yes, I'll marry you. Victor kissed her, deep and thorough, his hands settling on her hips.
When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers.
I love you, he said.
I know I don't say it enough, but I do. You changed my life, Elena. Made me want to be better than what I was. You changed mine too. Elena's hand slid into his hair. You saved me when I didn't think anyone could. Gave me a life I never dreamed was possible. So yeah, let's get married. Let's make this permanent. They got married 3 months later in their backyard, small ceremony with only the people who mattered. Elena wore a simple white dress. Noah toddled down the aisle as ring bearer with Marco's help, and Victor cried when he said his vows. It was imperfect and beautiful, and exactly what they needed.
The years that followed brought challenges. Victor's exit from his criminal empire wasn't completely clean. There were threats occasionally, people who felt betrayed or wanted to test if he'd really gone soft. But Victor handled them without violence, using the connections and reputation he'd built to resolve conflicts through negotiation instead of force. Elena's design business grew beyond her expectations. She hired staff, took on corporate clients, built something successful and entirely her own. Victor supported her without trying to control her work, proud of what she'd accomplished. Noah grew into a bright, energetic child who had his mother's creativity and his father's intensity. He asked endless questions, demanded bedtime stories, and showed no fear of anything. When he was 4, Elena got pregnant again. A surprise, but a welcome one. Their daughter arrived that winter, dark-haired like her brother, with her father's solemn gaze. 2 kids, Victor said, holding their newborn daughter while Noah climbed on the couch beside him to see his sister. We're outnumbered now. Terrified? Elena asked, sitting on his other side. Completely. But Victor was smiling, looking at their children with that same wonder he'd had the day Noah was born. But in a good way. Daddy, can I hold her? Noah asked, his eyes wide. Victor carefully transferred the baby to Noah's arms, supervising closely. Just like that, buddy. Support her head. You're a big brother now. That's an important job. Elena watched her family, this impossible constellation of people who'd come together through desperation and violence and somehow built something good. Victor had been right that first night. They'd both been broken when they found each other. But broken things could be remade, could be transformed into something stronger than the original. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with the weight of their pasts. Victor had nightmares occasionally about his father, about the violence he'd lived with for so long. Elena sometimes woke up in a panic, convinced Derek was breaking down the door, before Victor's arms reminded her she was safe. But they worked through it, went to therapy separately and together, learned to communicate, to trust, to build a partnership based on choice instead of desperation. When their daughter was 2 and Noah was 6, Victor officially shut down the last of his illegal operations. Everything was legitimate now: real estate holdings, restaurants, import businesses that operated entirely above board. It had taken years, careful planning, and a lot of patience, but he'd done it, rebuilt himself completely. How does it feel? Elena asked one night after they'd put the kids to bed. Being totally legitimate? Victor considered the question, pouring them both wine. Lighter. Like I'm not carrying the weight of all those years anymore. It's strange, but good. Do you miss it? The power, the fear, the way people used to look at you? Sometimes, Victor admitted. But then I come home to you and the kids and I remember what I traded it for. This is better. This is real. Elena raised her glass. To real things then, to building something good out of impossible circumstances. To us. Victor clinked his glass against hers. To that desperate kiss at a gala that changed everything. Best terrible decision I ever made, Elena said, echoing words from years ago. Best terrible decision we both made, Victor corrected. They drank to that, to second chances and broken people finding each other, to violence transformed into peace and fear replaced by love. The story could have ended differently. Elena could have stayed with Derek, slowly disappearing until there was nothing left. Victor could have remained the cold, violent man his father had raised him to be. They could have destroyed each other instead of building something together. But they hadn't.
Against all odds and logic, they'd found a way through the darkness to something resembling light. Years later, when Noah was graduating high school and their daughter was planning for college, Elena and Victor stood in their backyard watching their kids laugh with friends. They'd been together for 18 years, married for 15, and had weathered everything life threw at them. "You ever regret it?" Victor asked quietly. "Kissing me that night? Getting involved with all of this?" Elena looked at him, this man who'd been a stranger, then a protector, then a lover, then a husband and father and partner in every sense that mattered. His hair was more silver than dark now, lines around his eyes from laughter instead of stress. He'd aged into something softer than the hard man she'd first approached. "Not for a second," she said honestly. "You?" "Never." Victor pulled her close, his arm around her waist. "You saved me as much as I saved you. Maybe more." They stood like that, watching their children. Proof that broken people could create something whole, that violence could end, that cycles could be broken. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been clean, but it had been real, and it had been worth every difficult moment. Because in the end, that's what mattered. Not the circumstances that brought them together, but what they'd chosen to build afterward. Not the fear and violence they'd escaped, but the love and safety they'd created. Not the people they'd been when they met, but the people they'd become together. Elena had walked up to a dangerous man at a gala, desperate and terrified, and kissed him in front of everyone. That single moment of reckless courage had rewritten both their lives completely, and neither of them would change a thing. That night, after their kids had left and the house was quiet again, Victor and Elena sat on their porch like they had countless times before. The stars were bright overhead, the neighborhood peaceful around them. "I love you," Victor said, the words coming easier now after years of practice. "I love you too." Elena leaned against him, content and safe, and exactly where she was supposed to be. They'd both learned the hard way that love wasn't always gentle. Sometimes it was desperate kisses and dangerous men and choices made in fear. But sometimes, if you were lucky and brave and willing to do the work, that desperate beginning could transform into something lasting, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for, something like home.